Buongiorno. I'm here now to give the second talk of a series of talks that I plan to give down here at our summer home in Italy, in Montedona. And this is not an easy talk, but it's a talk which has been percolating in me for a number of days, if not weeks. I shared with you the other day that I have a client now in Germany, an older woman, well into her 80s, from Ravensburg, who had a very difficult childhood. Most people I work with have experienced a difficult childhood. And I was talking about cell memory in regards to this woman because, as I told you, she was one of 9 children, and the family had a restaurant. And the children, from the moment they could basically function, they were actually working as waiters and waitresses in the restaurant, probably cleaning dishes. And large families in Germany, and also in America after the war, were not uncommon because children were very practical. And not only that, there was no guarantee that children would survive childhood. And also in an area where I live, which is strongly Catholic, contraception is forbidden. And this woman, who I've known now for a couple of years, or a few years now, and we're friends actually, is now confronted, thanks to the COVID time, with this experience once again, you know, as a lot of us are. A lot of us think that we've worked on our childhood traumas and that they're taken care of, and we're finding out right now that there's something, a lot of residue that has not been actually dealt with. It's not surprising. And it's like this. I told you that this woman, her mother had already 6 children when she was pregnant with this woman, and she seriously contemplated doing an abortion at home. And that means this child was not really wanted. And a child in the uterus is actually quite aware at some point. They can hear and they feel a lot of what's going on because they're very open. And so for this woman, the 9 months in the uterus were not a very nice time, and that's our first residence, you know. Our first residence in life is the 9 months that we experience in the mother's womb. And, you know, when a country is recovering from a war, like Germany or America, then often the womb is not one of the safest places to be. And as you emerge from the womb 9 months later, if you survive that 9 months, then you're going to come into life with a pattern that life is very, first of all, that you're not wanted, you're not even worthy of being loved, because you know, your mother actually contemplated aborting you. And so not only that, you come into a pattern where you're trying to escape life. I've given a number of talks in the last 5 years about spiritual bypassing. You can find them on YouTube. And I'm glad that I discovered that for myself. And this woman clearly did spiritual bypassing. She went off to America and was in an ashram there, and so forth. And she never married and never bore a child. And it's no wonder. And what this woman did about 10 years ago is that she bought an apartment as an investment for her old age. And she has a tenant in this apartment who is turned out to be a nightmare. She's unemployed. She's living on the dole, as it were. And not only that, she harasses this woman constantly about damages that are done to the apartment. And the apartment's not anywhere near where this woman lives. And it's very clear in my therapeutic work, you know, you try to bring things together to make connections. It's very clear that this apartment has become. It's my vacuum cleaner. One second. It seems to disturb these talks. It's not even on duty now. It's just sitting there on its base, and it tends to complain. It's very clear that the tenant of this apartment has become a replacement for her mother over, 80 years ago. In other words, the mother is the custodian of the uterus, and she's the one who, if it's possible, has to make it a place where it's comfortable for a child, where the child's going to be wanted and loved and cared for. Okay? And so what this woman did was she allowed herself to buy an apartment and then put this tenant in who is basically terrorizing her. So now the apartment's become a substitute for the uterus that she had 80 years ago, and the tenant is actually a substitute for the mother. Do you understand? It's actually remarkable. And it's a very profound process that she's going through. I had, I don't want to get too personal about this, but I had a similar experience where shortly before my birth, 3 months before my birth, my parents lost a perfectly healthy boy to a misdiagnosis at a hospital in Yale, in New Haven, Connecticut. And my brother died suddenly. My mother nearly lost me 3 months before my birth. And then when I was born, my parents didn't trust life anymore because I looked just like my brother. I also had the experience where the uterus was not a very safe or loving place to be, period. And that got me thinking about my quest to rediscover the divine feminine. I told you the other day that I've been deeply involved with the goddess, the Anatolia goddess Artemis, in her Ephesian form, not in her Diana form. And I lead trips to Anatolia, to Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, and then through this great landscape, which is basically the real cradle of civilization. And there, Anatolia is known as the land of the goddess because since about over 12,000 years, there's been manifestations of various goddesses going back. Like in Catalhuk, the absolute divine mother is seen there, and she's over 10,000 years old. And even in Göbekli Tepe, this temple complex in the far east of Turkey, they found images of goddesses there as well, and that dates back over 12,000 years, maybe 13,000 years. And one of the goddesses, which now I'm quite actually fascinated by, is the goddess Sibylla or Kabila. Now, Sibylla or Kabila, I'll call her Sibylla. It's not clear how you pronounce her name. It depends which language you're speaking. Is an absolute Anatolian goddess. Okay, and she dates back maybe 10,000 years in different forms. And you'll find caves all through Anatolia where she was venerated. Not only through Anatolia, you'll find caves all through the Greek islands like Samos and Patmos, actually. And she was adopted by the Greeks who adored her, and then she was adopted by the Romans who actually took her off to Rome to protect Rome. So she was highly respected by everybody who encountered her. And her home is in the caves. Now, I want to talk about the caves because caves are very complicated symbols for us. If we go back to Plato, 500 years before Christ, and we look at the analogy of the cave that Plato gives in the Book of the Republic, it's not a nice place. It's a place of illusions. It's a place of confinement in illusions, a place of darkness. It's a place you want to escape and come into the true light and into the true reality. And that's interesting that Plato gave that analogy, simile, 500 years before Christ, exactly at the time when Sibylla was most venerated, and Artemis was then venerated as well, and Hecata. Hecata is the goddess of the underworld, and the underworld for us is something not very nice. But that has a lot to do with the development of the Judaic-Christian traditions. So you have one image of the cave, like in Anatolia, where it offers you refuge, because of the elements. There are man-made caves, and there are caves which are just existing, which our ancestors would then turn into homes and into altars, sanctuaries. You'll find almost in every cave in Anatolia, you'll find a place where they worship the goddess. Because you'll find stele from Sibylla or Artemis. And also protected us from wild animals, you know. So the cave served a very beautiful function for us, because it was basically became our first homes. And now Sibylla and Hecate and Artemis as goddesses, which are basically the absolute caretakers of the uterus. So the uterus is then a cave, okay? But a life-giving cave, a life-serving cave. In the uterus, a miracle happens. A new soul takes place there and starts to be given, thanks to the mother and thanks to the Mother Earth, a body that he or she will be able to use for 80, 90 years, if not longer. And so, in that sense, the cave and the uterus is really a sanctuary. Now, with the advent of Christianity, and I teach Christianity with a passion. I'll soon be on the island of Patmos with a number of souls to go through the book of Revelation. And on the island of Patmos, I'll give you a secret. It's not much of a secret. There's two holy places in Christianity. One is the cave of the Apocalypse, where John received the Apocalypse from the Christ. And if you sit there in front of the altar of the Apocalypse and you turn your head to the right, you'll see carved into the bedrock channels. Why? These are channels which are not used to direct the rain away. Rather, these are channels that indicate that the cave was first used to honor a goddess, and that the people went there. This is called recycling. The people went there to give sacrifices to the goddess of an animal like a rabbit or a duck or even a larger animal. And they would do it directly on the altar. Right, and then the blood would flow away, and they needed these channels that the blood would flow away. So the cave of the Apocalypse is now one of the central points for Christianity, but it's also was clearly a place where they venerated probably Sibylla. And then if you walk up the mountain and you go up to the beautiful monastery of John, which is about 1,000 years ago, it's no secret that there was an Artemis temple which stood there, maybe much longer than the John monastery is there, maybe 2,000 years or at least 1,500 years. You actually see the columns from the Artemis temple. They're used now to build a monastery. It's called recycling. Okay, but all of the Sibylla sanctuaries and temples, and also the image of Sibylla and Artemis and Hecate were destroyed from Christians. That's not a secret. Christians, once they had the security from Constantine, basically went on a rampage all through Asia Minor and all the way through Egypt, and destroyed all the images which they called pagan images. And so what happened was you had a transition where you had basically before the advent of Christianity, and you had a situation where the womb was basically considered a sanctuary and taken care of by Artemis, who is the eternal virgin, and by Sibylla, who is the caretaker of the caves. And out of this cave of the uterus, 9 months later, a child will enter life. There's a extraordinary monastery on Samos, on the island of Samos, called I forget the name. It's outside of Pythagorea, and I've been there a number of times. Why? Because the monastery is built inside a mountain. And when you enter it, it's like you're re-entering the uterus. And you go deeply through this birth channel of this cave, and leads you through a channel which is quite narrow. It's now a church for the Mother Mary, appropriately so, and it ends today in a chapel for Mary. And without a doubt, that was originally, or at least for a while, a cave for Sibylla, who was the goddess of Samos, before Hera took it over. And that symbol that you see, and this is why this example of this monastery in Samos is so extraordinary, because it so clearly symbolizes this movement in and out of a uterus, you know. And now it's in the hands of the Virgin Mary, which is a perfect transition, as it were, because she's the eternal Virgin. Okay, and so. What we've done now with Christianity is we've decided to redefine sexuality as something actually somewhat forbidden, or something very dirty or very private. And in doing so, we've redefined the reproduction organs fully. And sexuality became very complicated, and it sometimes is more ruled by lust as by love. And a lot of children who were conceived, especially in a Catholic household, where they believe strongly on the doctrines of guilt and shame and fear, and if a man came home from a bar and he might actually abuse his wife, and she might end up being pregnant then with the 7th or the 8th or the 9th child, and of course that child's not wanted, you know. So I thought about this today, you know. What is the uterus? Is it a prison or a paradise? And the fact is, it's both. For the ancient people, it was very much a paradise. First of all, it was a place of the absolute wonder of life, that two people could come together and invite a new soul into the world. But then slowly it's become more or less a prison, you know, where people actually select the birth date because they want to align it with the stars, so they do a C-section, you know, and also because they don't want to go through the trouble of carrying a child full term. And so this is what I'm saying now, you know, when I think about this woman in Germany, and I think about other people who have told me that when they were young children, their mother threatened them that she would take her life right in front of their eyes. I've heard this a number of times now. And can you imagine that? I mean, you're a young child, you know, and you're full of innocence and play, and your mother is full of depression and says to the children, you know, if this continues, I'm going to take my own life. And there goes all your security, and there goes all your desire to recreate life yourself. You understand? I'm sorry to present this heavy talk. I mean, you know, I'm personally confronted with my own, you know, as a healer, I'm used to dealing with people who had traumatic childhoods. I know practically every one of my clients had one in one form or the other. And I normally associate that with afterbirth environments. In other words, it's now clear that scientists have determined that young children up until the age of 4 or 5 experience time totally different as adults do. They suggest that a child experiences a single day as the equivalent of 20 days. And that's partly because the prefrontal cortex takes 22 years to develop. So you can't carry a past as a child, and you don't envision a future, so you're only in the present moment. And this is why Christ said, only the children will come into the kingdom of heavens, because we need to regain that trust, that innocence. But when we're so injured, not only from after-birth situations, but even pre-birth situations, yeah. So I just thought I'd just throw that out, you know, and that's one of the advantages of a paradigm shift, is that things are becoming incredibly clear right now. Incredibly clear right now. And a lot of healing is taking place. A lot of healing is taking place. And a lot of things that we thought were healed are showing themselves as unhealed and are opening up for healing, okay? And it's a time to be healed, thoroughly healed. And it's also a time for spiritual healing. Spiritual healing is probably one of the best methods right now to actually help people come out of these early childhood or pre-childhood experiences and traumas. At least that's my experience as a healer and somebody who teaches healing. All right. I guess that's enough. You get the picture. I mean, it's a pity when we define the uterus as a prison. And it's a beautiful thing when we define it as a sanctuary or a paradise. And for the ancients, it was clearly a paradise. You know, I don't want to see this through rosy glasses, and I don't want to exaggerate it because I know life was hard too, and childhood death was rampant back then. But still, because of the belief in the goddesses of Sibylla, and even pre-Sibylla goddesses, like the great mother of Catalahuk, the creative power of the divine feminine was worshipped over the divine masculine. As I've said before, you look at all these goddesses of Anatolia, and without an exception, they didn't have a male counterpart. No need. No need. That came later with the Hellenic Greek belief systems, and then even more so with the Roman systems. But even the Greeks and the Roman systems had a family tree which was 50% masculine and 50% feminine. Just like the ancient Egyptians. Okay. Thank you for taking the time to listening to this. I know that I went on a little long, but I wanted to get that off my chest. And again, since my last talk, somebody else registered for Patmos. I think now there's 3 places left for Patmos at the end of September. So contact me if you'd like to join us on an incredible trip to an incredible island, either because of John and because of Christ in the form that is taken today, or if you want to go there and have me show you the Aphrodite temple, the old city of Patmos, which was home to maybe 35,000 people, and the Helios temple, and the Scala was a town for Apollo with a hippodrome. This is the hidden Patmos. And the nice thing is you can actually see both. You can experience both. And they belong together, you know. They belong together. Stay well, be well, stay healthy, get healthy. Bless you. Take care. Thank you. Arrivederci.